The first step is to understand the nature of the beast. If you cannot understand the nature of the threat, how do you protect yourself? If you don't know that there's asbestos in the fibreboard you're breaking up, how do you protect yourself? So the first step is information. I think the key to this is understanding that it's about risk management. Now, early on, I expected, like most people would, that risk management involved managing the risk to public health and the risk to the environment. I think most citizens would think that when you're going to put a gas field in places where people live, that the thing to do is to protect people from this risk. To do this, you have to be open to all the possibilities of harm. You have to have a very open attitude, seeking out the risks, even the ones that you don't know about. Then from my interactions with the representatives of the gas industry and their supporters, what I learned was that, yes, they too were interested in risk management, but it's a different form of risk. The risk that they're primarily concerned with is the risk to the profit of the gas companies. And the biggest risk to the profit of the gas companies is that the people will find out what's going on, take exception to that, and do something that will hinder the operations of the gas industry. That kind of risk management, where they're trying to protect profits, comes with a whole set of tactics, ways of dealing with people. A popular one is to simply deny and say, I know of no compelling evidence that there is damage to harm or harm to health. I know of no evidence of aquifer interference. Now, this is a very interesting tactic, because what they're saying is that they're ignorant. Now, so long as they remain ignorant, so long as they make sure they don't come across evidence of harm, then they can continue to be technically truthful. And that's a very common one. I know of no evidence. Now, in risk management, where you're protecting the people, that's not a legitimate thing to say. You are meant to seek out the risks. Another favourite tactic is to attack and demean. They like to play the man and not the ball. So instead of dealing with a substantive argument, they sling insults around. You're just a radical activist, you're a greenie, you're a scaremonger. And so they throw names. That tactic just deflects attention away from the truth, and the truth is what they're up to. Oftentimes you'll hear them say, we've been doing it for years. So Senator Eric Abetz said to me, the fracking's been going on for 65 years. Other people will say the oil industry has been operating for 100 years. Well, what's time got to do with it? The asbestos was used in building products. It was first identified as definitely dangerous to health, I think, in the 1890s. So it was used in Australia right up till past the millennium, into the 2000s. So time has got nothing to do with it. But when they say, we've been doing this for this many years, it gives a superficial sense that, well, if it's been going that long, it must be all right. But this, of course, isn't a reasoned argument. This is quite a deceptive way to talk about the problem. A common thing that you'll hear is regulations. This is the best regulated industry. We have regulations here, we have regulations here, and they even like to list a whole series of laws and regulations that they supposedly comply with. Now, the trouble with this is it gives you a sense of security. It gives you a sense that the people are being protected by these rules and regulations. But this assumes, of course, that people follow rules and regulations. You might have rules and regulations that say that a builder should do a good job on your house, but it doesn't guarantee that he's going to do a good job on your house. The rules and regulations might mean that if you get a dodgy builder who makes a mess of your house, if you can go through a difficult and expensive legal process, you might have some redress. But the rules and regulations do not guarantee safety. That really depends on the culture, the expertise, the sense of responsibility of the gas company. And regulation is never going to protect you. If regulation really protected us from harm, there would be no crime. They change the burden of proof. If you go into a criminal court case, the burden of proof is on the prosecution to prove that the accused is guilty. There's an assumption of innocence. The burden of proof, if you want to introduce a new product onto the market that's potentially dangerous, reverses. The burden of proof, for instance, is on a pharmaceutical company to prove that their medication is safe and effective before it can be used with the public. Well, the gas industry likes to act as if they're criminals in a criminal court case because they want the community to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that they're doing harm. This is a perversion of the way it should be. And tied in with this is a particularly nasty thing that's been done, which is the decision was taken early on to avoid all baseline data. You would expect that before you built a gas field in places where people lived, that you would do a survey of people's health. You would expect that if you were going to drill down through aquifers, that you would do water testing. They don't do any of those things. These projects go ahead with no baseline. Why? So that later on, when illness turns up, when there's contamination of aquifers, they can turn around and say, you can't prove we did it. But there's a sting in the tail. They can only get away with that if people buy this con that the community has to prove that they're guilty, has to prove harm. If ever this government, any of these governments or this community gets around to saying, wait a minute, you're like a pharmaceutical company, let's see your proof that you're safe. Well, then they're in trouble because they cannot prove that their operations are safe. They say that gas is clean and green, and they base this on the true statement that when you burn gas, it burns, I think, with 40% less carbon dioxide than if you burn coal. But this is an advantage at the point of burning. So that advantage, which mainly accrues to the people overseas who buy our gas, has a real cost that comes with it. Because with the gas, the mining of it here is massively polluting, not just in the chemicals that are used to fracture the earth, not just in the chemicals and substances that are liberated from the coal seams, but in the massive amounts of diesel that are burnt to process the gas. It is a massively polluting industry. This is scientifically clear-cut. This is established. This is not a matter of opinion. It is a fact. This pollution is produced here at the point of production. The costs of that pollution are borne by the communities who live near these gas fields. So to just say, oh, it's cleaner because it burns clean in China or Korea or Japan is all very well for the Chinese or the Koreans. But it's the Australian people who are paying the true price. One amusing thing they like to do, and you hear it often, is that these people like to make friends of rocks and gases. You hear of them running Friends of Coal meetings at Parliament House. You'll see speeches in Parliament where they talk about carbon dioxide has had bad press. Carbon dioxide is our friend. It's the cycle of life. That amazing little rock coal, it's our friend and we will stand up for it. And they try to cover themselves with all of that respect that Australians have for someone who stands up for their mate who's under attack. Well, the thing about carbon dioxide being our friend, yes, the carbon cycle is the cycle of life. We all learned about it in school. We breathe in air, carbon dioxide gets produced in the paddock. There's a cycle, and it is the cycle of life. But normally it's a closed system. It's a zero-sum game for carbon dioxide and for carbon until you drill down 1 or 2 kilometres and bring vast amounts of carbon that has been safely secured for eons and bring it to the surface and add it to the cycle of life, it starts to become a bit of a cycle of death, because what you're doing then is you are supercharging this cycle of life on the surface. And as for coal, our dear little friend coal, that amazing little rock, if you were to speak to the coal miners in Queensland who have recently been diagnosed with black lung, they might say that with friends like that, who needs enemies? As far as I'm concerned, I'll stand up for my friends, and my friends just happen to be people. We're taught to see the big picture. We're taught to see all of the factors that contribute to a problem. So when people talk to me about the economic benefits, it's as if they're taking this tiny little slither of the problem. They're focusing in on one tiny aspect. They're not seeing the big picture. Economic activity by itself is not necessarily a good thing. If you want to increase the economic activity in an area, burn a town to the ground. You will have a massive spike in economic activity as you rebuild the town, but it doesn't mean it's a good idea. You have to ask yourself, what are the benefits, what are the costs? And they try to tell you that there are no costs. Well, there are costs. You cannot value these things in terms of economic activity. You have to look at what they contribute to the total human good. As a community, we have to ask questions about unfashionable things like tradition, about ethics, about what kind of life do we want, what sort of society, what type of community do we envisage. If we allow ourselves to be seduced into the religion of money, we lose so much that's precious. The way I think of the risk management issue is that it's the difference between people protectors and profit procurers. The people protectors say that risk management is about protecting people and the environment. The profit procurers, they say risk management is about hiding the truth to protect company profits.